So when we toured with Lamb of God in 2012, I used to ride on Lamb of God's bus because they had a spare bunk quite a bit. And I remember Chris Adler, who was a bit of a fan of Sylosis, telling me that the drums on Conclusion of an Age were programmed. I was like, no, they're real drums. They are sample replaced, but they're real, and Rob's a great drummer. He was like, nah, you're lying. They're programmed. I don't believe you. I was like, no, we have like videos of this on the internet that you can see Rob tracking the drums. So I'm going to go over some of my favourite riffs from Conclusion of an Age. Firstly, I'll speak a bit about some of the influences for the record. The main kind of two influences for the sound is like And Justice for All by Metallica and Arise by Sepultura. I was super into like thrashy riffs at the time. Still am. Sepultura, you could argue it's like part thrash, part death metal, but either way, that was a big part of what was going into the inspiration for Sylosis. And then obviously bands like Death, particularly like Individual Thought Patterns and Symbolic, and a bit of like The Sound of Perseverance. So that was kind of the more riffy side of things, but I also wanted to incorporate some melodic stuff in there. And I always found it kind of weird how loads of bands ripped off Metallica and no one ever ripped off like the more epic, grandiose kind of melodic stuff they did. And that was always kind of confusing to me. Like there were loads of bands, you know, in the thrash scene back in the day that would be like ripping off Metallica style riffs. But that whole kind of epic, majestic feel of like the intro to Battery and that kind of stuff, no one was really doing it that much. Obviously there were bands like Heathen that had a bit of that, and another band that was inspirational at the time was like Forbidden. So that was kind of where the influence for the riffing was, and we played in E standard, so I didn't think anyone was going to be confusing us with like the melodic death metal, like Swedish sounding stuff. So that was the inspiration for the record. That was the sound that we were going for. And anytime anyone was like, "Oh, it's melodic death metal," I'd be like, "No, it's not. It's not. It's not inspired by In Flames and that kind of stuff. It's thrash with melody." Prime example would be this riff in Blackest Skyline. That one is super inspired by like the Sound of Perseverance era Death. Now some people would say, oh, that's like a melodic death metal riff, but to me that was more like a thrashy melodic riff. And there's some riffs on like Twisted Into Form by Forbidden that are, you know, really similar to that. I actually wrote that riff before I heard the record Twisted Into Form, but there's one riff on that record that has the bit. So yeah, it was like a thrashy thing. Back in the day, it used to annoy me when people didn't understand like what we were going for and couldn't like hear the influences, and they'd lump us in with other bands that I didn't feel were like inspiring us. But I don't care about that stuff anymore. I think when you're a kid and you're just like, no, we're this is what we're doing, and people keep saying, oh, you're that sort of band. I used to get really annoyed anytime people would call us melodic death metal, because that's not ever really been much of an influence on the band. But having said that, obviously really melodic stuff like the stuff on Master of Puppets or stuff like To Live Is To Die by Metallica really wanted to kind of incorporate that kind of melody. And I was also a huge fan of bands like Morbid Angel. So I guess there is melody and death metal influences in there. It's just not borrowing from what I associate in my head as melodic death metal, which is a lot of like the kind of Swedish sounding stuff, which is down-tuned, usually like in B. I just wanted to kind of separate ourselves. But either way, whatever you want to call us, I really don't mind. Also on Conclusion of an Age, this is the first time we ever tuned our guitars up to E. We started off in drop B, then we moved to drop C, and then we did the EPs in drop D, and then we moved up to E standard finally. Back in the day, before we started touring, when we were playing just small kind of local shows, there'd always be tons of bands that just sounded really generic, just doing the same kind of drop C metalcore, kind of like that, you know, melodic kind of riffing, and then just a really boring kind of breakdown. And we just wanted to not get lumped in with that. Deathcore was coming in as well, which, you know, I liked a lot of that stuff as well, but I wanted to make sure we were kind of on our own trajectory and just separate ourselves. So we moved up to being in E standard tuning, purely trying to go for that kind of E standard and Justice for All, Sepultura, Arise kind of vibe. And we weren't doing anything that resembled a breakdown apart from like that riff in Terrace, I guess, at the end. Another band that was really inspirational was Obituary. Just realized I'm wearing the long sleeve right now, but it wasn't intentional. But they, I first heard them on some of the Roadrunner VHS tapes, Drilling the Vein. It was Don't Care on one of them and The End Complete on the other one. And I just always liked the sound of those inverted power chords. And being in E standard, I thought those inverted power chords sounded really cool and really heavy, especially when you kind of dig in and palm mute them. So we could still kind of get some of that chunky low end, but still be a more traditional like E standard guitar band. Anyway, so I'm just going to go through some of my favorite riffs, favorite songs, and talk about some of the parts and the writing. After Lifeless Years, not much of a riff, just a lot of galloping in that one. That one's always a bit of a right-hand burner. One thing I will speak about is this kind of moving arpeggiated sequence. So that one came about by me kind of ripping myself off. And what I mean by that was I was really happy with the song Manipulation Through Idols, which is the first song on the Supreme Oppressor. And I kind of wished that we had held it back for our debut record. And I really like the middle 8 section where it's, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like... And it's a very kind of Death meets Dimmu Borgir kind of inspired chord progression. I just remember thinking, oh, well, I'll do that again on the debut record that's going to be released on a, you know, a big worldwide label. So yeah, I really wanted to incorporate that kind of, I always think of it as black metal because a lot of black metal is moving minor shapes around, so you're changing key with every chord. Also the intro to like Trapped in a Corner by Death, that kind of sound. So yeah, I just wanted to incorporate that in this song. I still really like the song The Blackest Skyline. That one is still in our set to this day. And another riff that I really like is the middle 8 kind of Morbid Angel-y one. And when I was going through kind of thinking about what riffs stood out to me and my favorite riffs on this one, I've only just realized, probably everyone else that knows this album may have figured this out before me, but I've only just realized that the middle 8 riff in Stained Humanity is very, very similar. And that wasn't deliberate. I don't think there was a specific Morbid Angel riff that I was ripping off, but that was like a Morbid Angel vibe, I remember. Jumping ahead now on the record, but I'm just going to go for it. The Stained Humanity riff I remember writing in the guitar shop I used to work in. I don't know if I was working there at the time or if I'd just gone in to play a guitar after. I think I was working there. And that riff was written in drop D. And it was because it was like a symmetrical... like that, obviously... those are the wrong notes, and it was really easy to go like that. Obviously, when I moved it into E standard, I had to move it a bit. It wasn't quite as easy to play, but still a really satisfying one. That one came about just because of just messing around with just the shape of it and really kind of symmetrical. Some other riffs I really like are in Reflections Through Fire, and a lot of these riffs were written by our previous guitarist Gurneet. And particularly I really like the verse, the pre-chorus riff, sorry, that he wrote that one, and yeah, I love it. The harmonizing thing, just like the galloping patterns, really fun one to play. So I think my favorite riff on the entire record is the middle one from Conclusion of an Age. That kind of Testament thing we kind of pinched there. Yeah, it's just a really satisfying riff to play when it comes in, when it drops live. It's always really fun. The song didn't have the, well, kind of main riff or the intro riff as it is now. Didn't have that when we went in the studio. Didn't have it when we were recording drums. It only came to when we were tracking guitars. I was like, I think we need to change that. Because our other guitarist, Gunny, had that intro riff, and I think it was like... It sounded too much like a Lamb of God riff on As the Palaces Burn. So we completely changed it altogether and came up with the... when we were in the studio for that one. So Terrace is one of our more iconic songs, one of the biggest songs from this album. The intro riff I remember coming up with. Or maybe not coming up with, but I distinctly remember playing it in the guitar shop I used to work in. I know I wasn't working there at the time. I only worked in this shop for like 3 months maybe. I remember going in there just to like hang out and play around on some gear, and I was playing on a Malmsteen Strat. Like one of the scallop fretboard ones, through a Randall V2 or whatever. I can't remember what it was. Just like one of the amps that was around in 2007. And I just remember just trying out the amp, trying out the guitar, and playing that riff. So I don't know if I came up with it in the guitar store or I don't know, but that's my distinct memory of the first time I played that riff. This song could have been a bit different. When we were tracking the drums, they were tracked mostly to, we had a different riff in the middle eight. Actually, no, we must have rewritten it in the studio because there's some of the stuff that the drums go with. The original demo had a riff that I always thought sucked like a lot, and the outro riff sucked. Just listening back to the old demo now, I don't think it's as bad as I remember it being, but I'm really glad that we changed it in the studio because the middle eight section now is way more fun. So let's listen to my original demo. With a lot of my old demos, the snare drum is unbearably loud. I was just mixing on headphones and always had a stupidly loud, annoying snare sound. So yeah, I think in the studio we thought there was a lot of galloping, so we just switched that for some straight ahead down picking. I think I stole that kick off a Colin Richardson album. That's me, yeah, I spoke about it in the Leeds video, but yeah, me emulating kind of Demi Borgir kind of vibes with the chord progression there. So right, let's find this middle eight riff. Sounds like maybe the drums are the same, so I think we changed the drums, well, we changed the riff before we tracked the drums, but maybe the drums would come first and then we changed the riff. And this is different, same kind of moving chords, or like root notes. The outro section we came up with in the studio. I think the outro riff just felt really boring and stock. Not this bit, always like this bit. Just reusing that main riff but dropping it half time. just a bit boring. So in the studio we came up with a kind of inspired by that kind of outro breakdown riff in 5 Minutes Alone. Just the dun 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 dun, just that little cymbal choke, snare on its own. It's different enough to not be, you know, too comparable, but that was definitely kind of what we were thinking at the time. And then this riff, I remember writing that with Scott Atkins, and Scott just being like, do something like that, and then yeah, do that. And I always found the dive bomb in that outro riff really fun. I don't have the bar on my guitar right now, but the down with the left hand coming over to do it. And Oath of Silence is another one where a lot of these riffs were written by Gurney, the main riff. That's another one I haven't played in a long time. We haven't played that since I started doing vocals. I think I found the idea of the verse. That stuff was pretty tricky to do with the vocals. Funnily enough, the one and only time we've used a chromatic riff is in Oath of Silence. I don't have OCD, but I always got a bit OCD-ish around riffing or things being in key, particularly back then. I was quite, and still am, like kind of up on my theory, at least with just the modes and scales. And it always kind of bugged me when I'd hear bands do like a harmony, either in a solo or in a riff, and like one note was out of key, and it would just like grate against me. And I was so into everything being in key that I wouldn't sort of allow us to have anything chromatic. Even though I listened to tons of death metal, where loads of the riffs are chromatic or just, you know, not in any key, that kind of stuff doesn't really matter for the most part. Even like Decapitated, like Vogue, you know, on Nihility is one of our favourite records as a band and a huge influence on us. And all of the solos would be, you know, in key. There'd be a lot of Phrygian dominant, harmonic minor kind of leads or diminished stuff. But then there'd be loads of kind of just chromatic riffs, like whatever it may be. And for some reason, I just wouldn't allow us or couldn't allow myself to do anything that was out of key. But the Oath of Silence one was just very obviously, this is meant to be a chromatic descending riff. Another one of my favourite riffs is the kind of verse part B, I guess you'd call it, in Swallow the World. Another groovy one that I like is in The End of Withered. That song, and a lot of these songs were written in drop D, and it made it a lot more annoying to do because there was like which I wasn't used to doing with power chords because we were so used to playing in drop tuning, but just doing it without playing, you know, power chord shapes is a bit easier. Another one that I really like is there's like a Cannibal Corpse inspired riff in Plight of the Soul, and it was just in the studio, it was known as X. That is, I don't know if we've spoken about this much, but that backing vocal is Adam from Stamping Ground. Scott Atkins used to be in Stamping Ground. Huge fan of them, always loved their riffs. Check out A New Darkness Upon Us or Carved from Empty Words. Huge influence on us. They were tuned to E flat and was super heavy. So one of our biggest influences for riffing we were in E standard, they're in E flat. It's only one note away. They made being in a higher tuning super heavy and a huge influence. Tons of the riffing is really thrashy, but they have some incredibly heavy breakdowns and beatdown sections. So I've been trying to find some of the footage from this era. Can't track down the original DV tapes that we recorded on the camcorder. Found some of it, but maybe not all of it on some hard drives from back in the day. So when we toured with Lamb of God in 2012, I used to ride on Lamb of God's bus because they had a spare bunk quite a bit. And I remember Chris Adler, who was a bit of a fan of Sylosis, telling me that the drums on Conclusion of an Age were programmed. I was like, no, they're real drums. They are sample replaced, but they're real, and Rob's a great drummer. He was like, nah, you're lying. They're programmed. I don't believe you. I was like, no, we have like videos of this on the internet that you can see Rob tracking the drums. But I think we'd taken the videos down at that point. So this is some footage of Rob recording on a really bad camera. I don't know what the camera is. But yes, he did play the drums. They are real. But yeah, there's samples on there, and there's samples on pretty much every record we've ever done. Even Monolith, there are samples tucked in there. Transcendence. Yeah, so that's him tracking the first half of Transcendence, I guess. Was always a machine at drums, really consistent hitter, really consistent with his feet, and just yeah, super solid. Very lucky to have him back in the day. I don't know why we kept putting splashes in the gaps. I think Ashes of the Wake was out, and there were a lot of splashes on that record, so we put a lot of splashes everywhere in a lot of gaps. Full circle though. Chris Adler liked the band. Maybe it's all the splashes we put in. I don't know. Wailing on that snare. I don't know if there's a build-up on the record. I can't remember. That's the sort of thing that I would have been like, Rob, can you just do a build-up? And he'd be like, can't I just play like a cool fill? Yeah, I mean, I used to be really annoying with the drum parts and just have it in my head like, this is what I programmed, and a build-up leads to more excitement. That was my what I thought at the time anyway. And yeah, I think it used to annoy Rob, which is very understandable. Afterlifeless Years intro then. I don't know why we just didn't use this camera audio when we did the record. Sounds incredible. That fill looks cooler than it is. It's a cool fill, but just the way he's playing it.
We should go back to the Randolph for this, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what we.
So we tracked the record, all the rhythm tracks. It's quad tracked through a Randall Ultra XL. It's one of those. I can't remember the name of the amp. I know the module was the Ultra XL, but one of the Randall module amps where you could, change out different modules in it. And then when it came to the mix, I think the 5150. I just remember Scott sending mixes and just being like, the Randall's not really got that thickness, and I don't know. I think I've got some files somewhere of a mix with the Randall, but we ended up reamping 2 tracks of 5150, and then it was like, no, let's just reamp the whole record 5150. And I still love the guitar tone on Conclusion of an Age.
Okay.
carpet of white down.
We were staying in a travel lodge near Scott's, and we'd watch a lot of Alan Partridge, The Day Today, Brass Eye, and all kinds of other stuff in the evenings when we went home, usually with a meal of pot noodles.
That's fucking brutal.
Don't know what I was thinking there with that headband. It's just into like the 80s, wasn't I, at the time? Just trying to be thrash.
EMG A1, 207.
The trusty.
I was going to put an 85 in, but I left it at home.
Originally had skulls.
Went through the Randall. Was it RM 100?
I sound like such a baby right then. It's like my voice had barely dropped. Little kid. Went through the Randall. That's my crank.
Through the Ultra XL channel.
Tried all of them.
Yeah, the crank was too muddy. It's the tightest one of the lot.
So
Scott can tell you about the guitar tone.
Tight.
Tight guitar tone, yep.
it's a tight tone.
Tight and dry. Tuned up to E, whole album's in E standard. Yeah, it's more definition in all the notes.
Still a huge fan of Scott Adkins' work. Like the Cradle of Filth mixes he's done recently. The tones are always amazing. Love his mixes. Really like looked up to him. Still do, but particularly that time when we were just like starting out and he was like in Stamping Ground. I remember going to see them support Chimera on the Impossibility of Reason tour and that kind of stuff. And yeah, the tones he used to get even back then were incredible. So huge shout out to Scott for making that record sound the way it does, and particularly that guitar tone. So good. Unless we had some other footage that I can't find, I think this is like the only footage of us tracking rhythm guitars. Just a bit of Oath of Silence. And not doing as much downpicking on it as I thought I did. Oh, this is Last Remaining Light.
Keep doing that.
Keep doing that.
See,
A lot of repetition on that record. So yeah, the guitars were done in 12 days. So that's just the rhythm guitars, quad track. So 2 guitars left and right, either side of the mix. Yeah, trying to go for as honest takes as possible. There are definitely sections where we would like punch in or, you know, kind of do things like there were so many riffs that were written in drop D that when I then had to play them in E standard with a traditional power chord, there was a lot more like moving around because I couldn't just do different fingers for each chord. So yeah, those are some of my favorite riffs from Conclusion of an Age.